Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Hello and welcome to the Skeptic Zone, episode number 287 for the 20th of April, 2014. Richard Saunders here with you in Sydney, Australia, full to the brim of chocolate Easter eggs and chocolate bars and chocolate with some chocolate. It's just that time of the year, folks, and when you have nieces and nephews who are mad keen on Easter egg hunts, well, I mean, you've got to, play the part and be a good uncle, good aunt, good uncle, and eat lots of chocolate. But putting aside the chocolate for one moment, what's coming up on this week's episode of The Skeptic Zone? It's the welcome return of A Grain of Salt with Eran Segev. Lucky Eran was over at QED, Question, Explore, Discover, the wonderful convention in Manchester. And this week, to kick off his season of interviews from QED, Eran chats to Michael Marshall from the Merseyside Skeptics and the relatively new Good Thinking website. I quite like this interview. It's sort of like more like a fireside chat with Michael Marshall, getting his insights into QED and other adventures. After that, it's a week in science from our friends at the Royal Institution of Australia, www.riaus.org.au, the place I keep threatening to visit my friend Dr. Paul Willis, who will no doubt show me his extensive collection of chocolate. And then following that, it's Evidence Please, a new segment with Jo Alabaster. Jo, you remember from last week's show, reading about her success in getting some homeopathy news taken off the internet. This week, Jo reads a newspaper report on the dangers of whooping cough. And to round off the show, it's an update from our friend Dr Besh Saab, who's in Olomouc in the Czech Republic right now, attending the film festival. Lucky Besh, lucky guy. He's going to tell us what it was really like to be in that Mars simulation mission. That would have been interesting for sure. And some more information about the festival in the Czech Republic. Before we get stuck into this show, I've been asked to tell you about a petition at the moment. Take action to improve vaccination rates across Queensland. I have a link to this petition, which is at change.org, on the show notes at www.skepticzone.tv. And some news for Sydney-siders, Sydney Skeptics. Please come to the next Australian Skeptics dinner meeting, which will be on the 24th of May, Saturday the 24th of May, at the Ryde Eastwoods Leagues Club. And you can find information at www.skeptics.com.au. Ooh, this talk coming up. Dr Cameron Webb, medical entomologist from the University of Sydney and Westmead Hospital, will give a fun, fascinating and itch-inducing presentation on everything you ever wanted to know, and quite a lot you didn't want to know, about insects that want to drink your blood. Yes, folks, we certainly deliver interesting talks at the Australian Skeptics dinner meeting. Learn about killer mozzies. Learn about blood-sucking bats that want to drink your tears. After dinner, I hope. And discuss whether we really need to get rid of all our kangaroos and birds. Dr. Mozzie will be the one to answer all your questions. Now, Dr. Cameron Webb was a guest recently at Skeptics in the Pub in Sydney and gave a fascinating talk about nasty insects and mosquito-type things, so I'm really looking forward to this dinner. If you want to come along, it's Saturday, May 24th. Tickets at www.skeptics.com.au. But for now, while I run downstairs, open up the fridge, and heaven knows, I might even find some chocolate. While I'm doing that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone.
Grain of salt, grain of salt, grain of salt.
Let's all take this with a grain of salt. Here's Eran Segev.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a
So I'm here with Michael Marshall, who's one of the organisers of QED. Head organizer, not head organizer?
No, not head. There's no head organizer.
Not head organizer.
There's no head organizer.
You all work as a team?
We are all equal. We are all equals in the QED world.
Yeah.
Especially now Mike Hall isn't being involved this year. I think Mike Hall was probably our head organizer in the past because whatever Mike Hall does, he tends to be the head at it because he is the brain. You know, that man has a brain and everything goes through his brain, and he's an absolute genius, and he sees details that everybody else misses. But he wasn't involved in QED this year, so
but
we're all equal.
One of the things that we discussed just before we started recording was about the half with the communication skills. So he's not responsible for that.
Oh God, no! Mike's got no communication skills. Christ, no! He's a software developer. You know, Mike is the kind of guy who will sit in the corner of a room for the first 4 or 5 times that you meet him, and then the 6th time he'll randomly talk to you like he's known you for 30 years. That's what Mike is like, which is great because he's. And the funny thing about Mike, and I mean, maybe I know listeners to the show may have heard our show Skeptics with a K in the past. We've certainly, I know Richard's been running ads for our show for a very, very long time, which is great. And sometimes we even give him a new ad. Every 3 or 4 years, we like to throw over a new ad just to freshen things up a little bit. But the weird thing with Mike is that I knew him. I didn't know him at all when we started the Merseyside Skeptics Society, but there was myself, there was him, and there was Colin, so the 3 guys who were on the Skeptics with the K show. And I'd never met Mike before in my life. And we had a Skeptics in the pub. We just had the first ever meet-up. And weirdly, and I have no idea why, but from day one, we had the kind of rapport that we have even now. We had this weird instant kind of rapport where we kind of knew that we could ridicule each other and it'd be all right. And we knew where each other's limits were very quickly. And I quite like ridiculing people around. I mean, you spent the weekend with me. And I'd like to think that you've enjoyed being on the edge of my broadsword from time to time.
So well, it's also the kind of connection that you can maintain without necessarily having eye contact, which is a very important thing.
There's a joke that Mike tells that you can tell an extrovert developer because he looks at your shoes while he's talking to you. Which I think, which kind of sums it up. But no, I mean, I think Mike is one of the great unsung skeptics in the UK, which is weird because he's involved in so many big skeptical projects, but he doesn't like any acclaim, doesn't like any accord. Whereas I don't mind acclaim and accord, but I only like acclaim and accord that I've worked for. And I remember I was actually speaking to someone, I forget when, and somebody asked me, what is the best way to be quite well known in skepticism? I said, well, the easiest way, if you want the easiest way, is to work incredibly hard for a number of years, work your absolute socks off, and try and do everything absolutely perfectly. It sounds like more work in the long run, but when you get there, you're on safer ground than if you've just written a few blogs slagging a few people off and suddenly found yourself at the top on very shaky ground. Just work hard, try and do things the right way. So yeah, I think that's the best way to go about it.
So you clearly work very hard. You have a number of projects that I know about, probably a few that I don't know about. So you're on Skeptics with a K. You obviously were organising QED now, but you also have a new job.
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited about the new job, and it's a remarkable opportunity. It's one of those things that you've got to kind of pinch yourself about. So there's a skeptical charity here in the UK called the Good Thinking Society, which was set up by Simon Singh, who's a fantastic force for phenomenal good, and he has been for a huge number of years, and he's very well known to your listeners, I'm absolutely sure, because he's known to everybody in skepticism. He's a great advocate for reason. So he set the charity up to say, what would a skeptical charity in the UK look like? It's very small, it's very slimline and kind of agile. And we're just going to try and find out what could be done. So I joined the charity as the full-time project director about 3 weeks, a month ago now. And we're now starting to see what it is that role even means and what we can do and what kind of opportunities are out there. And we're looking at many different things in terms of alternative medicine. We're very keen on tackling psychics. That's a big bugbear of mine and something I've been fighting for 5 or 6 years now. But already we've started to produce a few things that we're quite happy with. So I'm sure you listeners be aware that it was recently, even as we speak right now, it's World Homeopathy Awareness Week.
Yes. And
it kind of occurred to me, it occurred to me a little while ago, even when I was doing the 1023 campaign, so a couple of years ago, the 1023 campaign was all about raising awareness of homeopathy. And then you get World Homeopathy Awareness Week and you think, well, homeopathy awareness is what we're about. Homeopaths aren't about that. They're about homeopathy familiarity. You know, they want people to have a fuzzy level of familiarity. Oh, it's that thing, isn't it? That's kind of all gentle and stuff.
That
Yeah,
natural,
we'll do that. Yeah,
that
it's all
natural thing.
lovely and natural and gentle. We'll do that. But we're about awareness to say, you know that it's diluted to a point where there's nothing in it. And if you replace real medicine for it, people die. And it's a huge amount of money. And people say that... supporters of homeopathy say that the pharmaceutical companies suppress homeopathy because they can't afford to sell it themselves. And then you look at the amount of money that Waleda and Boron and Nelson's make out of homeopathy, and it's a huge, huge sum. And we're talking
And even
tens,
Merck.
hundreds. Merck, exactly, yeah. Merck, they sell their own. It's ludicrous to suggest that you can't sell it. In fact, I was recently at the Mind Body Wallet Festival, as I know you Aussies like to call it. And I had one of these practitioners in front of me, and he was saying, oh, well, you know, this one chap, he had a very serious lung disease and he wasn't doing very well. And then we came along and we gave him our kind of stuff and he was completely cured. And I was saying, wow, that's amazing. But it's amazing that more people don't know about this. Why isn't this more widely known? He said, well, the pharmaceutical companies, they suppress it because they can't sell this. They can't profit from this. I said, oh, that's fascinating. So how much does it cost for one of your treatments? £45. I was like, oh, okay, so you can sell it. You've got no problem selling it. That's easy enough for you. So when we talk about homeopathy awareness, I think it's very clear that when, as skeptics, what we're trying to do is raise awareness. So we launched a website, homeopathyawarenessweek.org, because we found that I noticed that homeopathyawarenessweek.com went to Nelson's, the UK distributor who supplied boots to many of the people. And homeopathyawarenessweek.co.uk also went to Nelson's. So they really thought they were going to cash in a little bit from this. They thought they were going to sell some stuff. And I noticed that homeopathyawarenessweek.org was free. So I bought it. I thought, you want awareness? We'll give you some awareness. Let's make people really aware. So, and it's been going really well. I mean, on the first day that we launched, we got 40,000 hits, something like that. And then the next day, I had an article in The Guardian, and the Guardian title for my article was wonderful. I don't, as you might know if you've ever written it. Yeah, you don't write the title. Yeah. But the editor really got the feel for what I was trying to do, because he put the title, I forget exactly, but it was along the lines of why better awareness of homeopathy will lead to a healthier and happier life. And the number of people in the comments who came saying, I came here ready to slag you off, but it kind of makes sense, actually, because they read that I was saying, well, if we're going to make people aware of homeopathy, you should be aware that homeopathy will claim to treat AIDS and malaria and all these horrible things in very bad places. And I also wrote in the article that you have Homeopaths Without Borders, who I said, they go into these places with sugar pills. They got suitcases filled with sugar pills, so they're not so much Médecins Sans Frontières as Médecins Sans Médecin, which I was very, very happy with that line.
Sans medicine.
Yeah, exactly. And then so that was on Friday, and then on Saturday that was on Boing Boing, and I think by today, as we're recording this Sunday, I think we had to kind of renew a lease with our hosting because we've managed to collapse the server. So the hosting were very, very kind to extend the server, which means that we must have been kind of caning it in terms of hits, because everyone's sort of gone, actually, yeah, homeopathy awareness is exactly what skepticism should be doing. Yes. So I quite like the idea that when the next Homeopathy Awareness Week comes around, and you have the Homeopathy Awareness Week organisers, and they're just about to press hit on that press release, they're just about press send, and they kind of think, maybe not, because last time it kind of backfired on us. I don't want to give them that little air of doubt.
Which is something similar to what happened with chiropractic. I mean, they went out, all guns blazing, and ended up in deep shit, basically, from a public PR perspective.
Well, I mean, these kind of treatments, when they talk about awareness weeks, and when they talk about they're promotional weeks, and it's ludicrous in a way, because when it comes to Homeopathy Awareness Week, the reason it's Homeopathy Awareness Week is because some homeopaths thought, yeah, we'll have this week. Let's sell more products this week. Let's tell people this is our week. Nobody decrees these days or these weeks. I mean, one of my big skeptical projects over the last kind of 5 or 6 years has been looking at PR in the media. And one of the topics I've not really gone into, but I've peripherally researched, and I've considered making part of my normal research, is these awareness days or these specific weeks. And if you actually look, you can pick any date in the calendar and find there are 3, 4, 5 different days. And then that day makes up part of 2, 3, 4 different weeks, and it's a part of a different month. And they're all just decided on by the PR companies or by the people who are
So why can't we decide?
Absolutely, and maybe that's something that we should do in the future, and maybe that's something you should be chatting to me about in a couple of months.
Yeah.
But
we had a chat about it a week.
So that's something that we'll come back to. But so the homeopaths just decided that Homeopathy Awareness Week, this is our week to try and sell more products. But I'd like to think that every time there's a Homeopathy Awareness Week, Skeptics will be making people more aware of homeopathy than homeopaths ever will be, because they will never make you aware of what homeopathy actually is, or what it does, or how it doesn't work, or what any of the evidence is. They'll just be telling you, hey, buy these pills, they're kind of nice and they're gentle and they're kind of sweet, but they won't actually give you any real information.
Again, I know what it's like at the end of a conference like this, you just relax.
You relax for the first time in a number of days.
I call it the knee buckle thing. Like the knees just buckle. They don't need to support you anymore. You can let loose a little bit. But first of all, I really have to say it that this is an amazing conference. It really is.
Well, thank you
just
so much.
It's the speakers, and it's the fact that everything really just worked really well. But it's the most important thing is I come to these conferences not for the speakers. I come completely for the social aspects, to meet people, to talk to people. I know we've discussed this, that one of your goals in this conference, in a conference like this, is exactly that, so that people get together and start talking about the kind of things that they can do. You can learn from other people. I mentioned to Mike earlier about how at TAM they actually did a little bit of a survey, and they found that immediately after TAM, several new groups. Every year there's several new groups that start immediately after TAM because people get together and they learn from other people. So there's the social side is just so incredibly important. And I think there's something that you've done here, and I'm not sure exactly whether I can pin it down, but I'd be interested to try to, that you've created a really nice, positive atmosphere, and you've given enough time for people to socialize, which is also good. Perhaps actually it might be a good idea to add a little bit more time between the talks that people can... But again, we'll talk about these things.
Well, I guess the real ethos we try and aim for with QED is the speakers are very much there for the attendees.
Yes.
And the organisers are there for the attendees. And the venue and all the plans are there to have people there talking to each other and around each other. So we always try and gear it not towards the speakers but towards the attendees. And sometimes we'll even choose the speakers depending on who we think will be most likely to hang around the attendees. Because what we love most is that, and tonight, we were in the bar in the evening QED, and Nate Phelps, phenomenal keynote speaker at QED. Amazing speech. I was crying. I was outright crying at how wonderful his talk was, and how moving and emotional and utterly beautiful the way he expressed the tragedy and then the positivity of his life in that order. The tragedy of his upbringing, and the positivity of how he sort of punched his way out of that upbringing and became the man that he is now. Wonderful talk. And he's just a guy who sat in the corner of the bar just chatting to people. Yeah. And everybody we have here, I think, at this conference is just chatting to people at the bar. And I think that's so important, that there is no... I hate more than anything this them and us mentality, that there are no people bigger than us. When we've had Richard Dawkins at previous QEDs, the most wonderful thing I've seen is that one of the panel rooms that we had was a particular debate which got very full and very vociferous and was very lively. And at one point there was just Richard Dawkins just sat cross-legged on the floor. There was no seats for him, so he just came in and he sat cross-legged on the floor, and he was just sort of contributing like everybody else, because we seem to we really try quite hard to engender this idea that everybody who turns up is as valid as everybody else, whether you're speaking, whether you're coming, whether you're on a panel, whether you're an organiser. Everybody, we're skeptics, we're here for the same reason. And we're here for the same goals, really. And I think if we keep that mentality that there is no class, there is no VIP, that we're all just here because we believe in the same thing, then I think that's kind of the best thing to kind of aim for.
Absolutely,
really.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And in fact, you had a green room. Which kind of...
Well, we sort of did.
We sort of did.
Right, so in
I actually knew where it was, because on the first day, Nick asked me to, I think you and Nick asked me to carry some stuff there. But then it was left untouched. I actually used it for a couple of interviews. But none of the speakers knew where it was. It wasn't...
Well, it never came up, so we never felt any to discuss it. So in
but the thing is, but the reality is that... a green room is probably the counterproductive from that perspective. So speakers do sometimes need time to prepare, so it's good to have that kind of facility sometimes, perhaps, for some speakers, to just be able to go over the notes and all that. But the reality is, you know what, I saw Paul sitting in the bar and going over things, and I saw other speakers. Just you know, you don't need that necessarily that space, and I think a green room could create that separation, that VIP thing.
Yeah, it's an odd one. So this is the first time we're in a new venue, and the previous venue was lovely. It was a little small for how big we've become, which is a real testament to how much I think we've encaptured the kind of the imagination of the UK skeptic, or even the European. We get so many European skeptics. It's wonderful to see people from different countries coming here and talking about how it works.
Actually,
there's
a lot of countries,
so many. It's brilliant. It's brilliant because it's quite easy to get to here, I guess, because we're quite accessible. But in our previous venue, we did have a green room, and it was the balcony overlooking the main room. And it was nice, and it was kind of a little tricky to get to, and a lot of our speakers kind of hung around there while they were preparing notes, and but a lot of others didn't, and they were amongst the crowd. And this year we do have a green room. It's a little trickier to get to.
It's not a little trickier; it's a bloody maze.
Well, the whole hotel is a maze, but it will be easy to get to. No one's asked us.
It's actually quite easy to get to. It's not very easy to get back. There's a split on the way back.
It's true.
If you get it wrong, if you get it wrong, you end up on stage.
Yeah. But I mean, that's true. But I quite like that, because the thing is, this hotel is a maze, but it's also a maze with a million different corridors.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're sat in one of the side rooms that we didn't hire, but it was just one of the rooms that was free the whole time. There's always space in this building if you need some private time. But what we didn't want is people just hiding away. And but we also, we choose our speakers very specifically for people that we think are going to be very happy being around people. And I think that's so important. We don't want someone who wants to come in, do their talk and leave again, because we want to say we're all the same. You know, we're all the person who sat on row 17 of the conference this year might be on stage next year. It all depends on the work that you do and the story that you have to tell and the messages that you're
But it's
putting out.
actually, it's a little bit more. You said next year. The person who was on stage 2 hours ago is on row 17 now, and there was quite a lot of I think I really don't think that there was any distinction or any gap
hierarchy.
There's no.
And I think as skeptics, I don't believe that we should have a hierarchy. I fundamentally don't.
I think by and large, look, definitely at Australian conferences, we haven't had any. We haven't had anything that would suggest a hierarchy with the level of accessibility. Even at TAM, I think to a large extent, with probably a few exceptions, there is that accessibility, and I think that's one of the things that people like about going to TAM. For example, I don't know. Have you ever been to TAM?
No, I've never actually been to America, let alone to TAM. But I think the curious thing, I guess, even about people in general, is that cultures self-arrange unless you actively stop them.
Yes.
So you have to actively stop people arranging into a hierarchy. So what we try and do at QED is actively try and... it's going to sound ridiculous, but as a metaphor, but you put oil on water, and the oil rises on the top until you put some washing up liquid on it, and everything mixes back together. And as the organisers, we try and be the washing up liquid to stop the oil and the water separate. You say it's all just one mixture.
That was a chemistry metaphor.
I know.
Well done.
And I'm an English literature graduate, but it was a metaphor, and therefore I'm qualified to do it. I have a degree that says I can do metaphors, and I'm allowed.
Yeah, even if they're wrong.
That was right. That was perfectly fine.
That's the problem. It was too scientific. Yeah. So, how do you feel about the changes that you've made in Skeptics with a K now with Alice as the new member? Mike already spoke about her.
Oh, he's always talked about Alice. I mean, I absolutely love Alice. And the thing is, I loved Colin. I love Colin. It's not like he's dead or gone. It's not like if you're not on the show anymore, you're dead to me. No, he's very much a part of my life, and he's a wonderful, wonderful guy, and he's a lovely fella. But obviously, he's about to become a father for the first time, and he just doesn't have the time to go and talk nonsense with a couple of dickheads like me and Mike for a couple of hours on every other week. But yeah, no, it's really nice because Alice, we've known Alice for a very, very long time, and I think as the Merseyside Skeptic Society, we seem to be growing with a number of different people that we kind of... I genuinely believe if you do things the right way, with the right kind of spirit, the right intention, you're really trying to do it the right way, you gravitate people toward you who recognize your intention. And so these guys, they're trying to do something, and I'd like to do something as well. And you start to sort of attract people like a little kind of magnet or a gravitational force. You start to sort of build your little bulk of collectives across your community. And so from there you can start seeing, well, who's got what kind of skills. And I love Alice because Alice has got, she's a hard scientist, which me and Mike certainly aren't, so this will be the first time we're really challenged on science, because Alice knows stuff and she experiments. Alice has cells in a dish somewhere. That's more than me and Mike will ever have. That's more scientific than we could ever pretend to be.
I have kids. I have cells in a dish in the kitchen every day. Exactly. And I have to fight to get people to put them in the dishwasher.
Yeah. So we're really happy. And we've had other members of the Skeptic Society on there as well. And we've had Geraint, who is a plant biologist, and again, incredibly knowledgeable about the stuff that he does. And it's impressive to have somebody who usually we're too busy ridiculing in the pub for various different reasons. And then suddenly he comes on the show and he actually talks about the stuff he really knows about. It's like, oh, this guy knows stuff. Turns out we know a guy who knows stuff. How did this happen? Because I don't know stuff. I just make silly jokes. I just make puns, basically. Make puns and kind of get a bit irate at people who are hurting people. That's kind of the best that I do. I get a little passionate, and that's the best that I can do. But we sometimes kind of gravitate people towards us who know stuff and do stuff, and that's quite exciting.
Marsh, I must tell you that, first of all, it's been a great pleasure meeting you after being in touch for years.
So long, absolutely.
It has been
and
years.
I say you're a long and auspicious line of Australians who've come to QED and been incredibly supportive and utterly bloody lovely. There's yourself and Rachie and Richard. We've had some really lovely members of Australian Skeptics. So I think there's a real affinity between UK Skeptics and Aussie Skeptics.
We should do things together as well.
We should. We absolutely should.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Cheers.
Grain of salt now. Grain of salt, you gotta take it with a...
Hey guys, this is Jay from the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And whoa, hold on, whoa! Everybody knows I'm the only reason to listen to the freaking show, right? I mean, if it was up to me, the show would start with this. Yeah, boy! Well, Rebecca would hate that probably, but I mean, I'd rock that. Listen to our show and you can learn about cool stuff like a technological singularity, which is someday when technology progresses so fast that it would make the Industrial Revolution look like a kid's science project. Anyway, come check us out at www.theskepticsguide.org and get your science on!
Welcome to a week in science from RiAus, bringing you the science you need to know. Chocolate, one of the world's favourite sweet foods. Words cannot describe how much I love chocolate. The cacao bean, the key ingredient of chocolate, originates from South America and was brought to Europe by the Spanish in the 16th century. Since then, there have been a number of benefits being promoted. However, research has started to show that chocolate may indeed have a number of good effects on our health. In particular, cocoa is a rich source of flavonols, chemicals which have an anti-inflammatory effect. They accumulate in the brain regions involved in learning and memory, especially the hippocampus. Flavonols have also been shown to increase blood flow to the brain. While this doesn't necessarily mean that chocolate will make you smarter, well, it can't hurt. There is also evidence showing cocoa's benefits for the heart and circulation, including reducing blood pressure by relaxing vessel muscles. Dark chocolate reduces platelet aggregation in blood vessels, which might help prevent blockages which can result in heart attacks. We've only touched on the health benefits of chocolate. There is also evidence it has positive effects on cholesterol, insulin resistance and blood vessel function, and improves mood and well-being. It should be noted though that the processing of cocoa to chocolate reduces the flavonol content, so studies which show an effect using cocoa may not necessarily have the same effect using processed chocolate. As always, talk to your doctor about the best health plan for you. And now, 4 fast facts about our favourite sweet food. Cacao beans, the base ingredients of chocolate, were used by the Aztecs as a form of currency. Cacao beans grow inside pods, with each pod containing around 40 beans. 43% of Nobel Prize winners eat chocolate more than twice per week, compared to just 25% of the general public. And while we're talking about Nobel Prizes, countries with the highest chocolate consumption also have the most Nobel Prize winners. That's it for this week in science. Want to find out more about chocolate? Who wouldn't? Go to the RiAus website, riaus.org.au. Follow us on Twitter at RiAus and like us on Facebook. I'm Ben Lewis, and we'll catch you next week.
The internet may be the information superhighway, but there is no promise that the information is factually correct. So when people use the internet to educate themselves, they are at risk of being misinformed and reaching false conclusions. But don't worry, there is a solution. Rebutter is a browser plugin which tells users when the web page they are currently viewing has been disputed elsewhere on the internet. With Rebutter installed, anytime you read a page making a claim of truth, you have immediate access to another page which explains why that claim is incorrect. So you not only get an opposing perspective and more information on the subject, but you get a direct demonstration of how to critically analyse the page you just read. Imagine a world where every internet user was able to critically reflect on the information that the internet presents to them. Because that is the internet that Rebutter and its community of volunteers are building. Go to rebutter.com, that's rbutr.com, install a plugin and see what you can do to help us bring about this revolution.
What we want is some more evidence, please. Here's Jo Alabaster.
Hello, this is Jo Alabaster. From the Courier Mail newspaper, dated April 13, 2014, by Laura Chalmers. It started as a niggling cough that wouldn't go away when Heidi Robertson was 25 weeks pregnant. Before long, the cough turned into severe coughing fits that left her vomiting and fearing for her baby's health. Quote, "It was terrifying. I burst blood vessels. I was incontinent and I vomited after every coughing fit for 3 months." End quote, she said. Quote, "I would cough so violently that I was worried that I could lose the baby." End quote. Mrs. Robertson, 40, considers herself extremely lucky that she didn't infect her newborn Hugo, now 5, when he was born in 2009, or her older son Charlie, now 7. Hugo was born in the Royal Brisbane Hospital only a few weeks before Dana McCaffrey, the 4-week-old daughter of Tony and David McCaffrey, who died from whooping cough in March 2009. Quote, "I could have easily passed this on to my baby if I was still infectious when he was born. The fact he was not infected was a miracle," end quote, Mrs. Robertson said. Quote, "I heard about Dana's death at the time, and given I had recently had the diagnosis myself, I was absolutely horrified to think that could have been my baby," end quote. Mrs. Robertson is part of a group of Northern Rivers mothers raising awareness of the importance of vaccinations for parents of newborns and pregnant women. Quote, "The awareness that adults do need a booster is just not out there," end quote, she said. Quote, "I had every vaccination as a child and lots more as I worked overseas, but one booster never mentioned to me was the whooping cough booster. It is still a message that is not seeming to get around," end quote. Parents of babies under 6 months received free vaccines in Queensland, but the program ceased on June 30, 2012. The National Immunisation Handbook recommends a whooping cough booster either pre-pregnancy, during the 3rd trimester, or as soon as possible after delivery. AMA Queensland President-elect Dr Sean Rudd said parents and grandparents were often keen to get a whooping cough booster when advised of the evidence. Queensland Health Communicable Diseases Unit Senior Director Dr Sonia Bennett encouraged parents of newborns and other family members in contact with the baby to get the whooping cough vaccine. Quote, "Having government support for these things can certainly improve and increase the uptake, and that would be a good thing," end quote, he said.
Virtual Skeptics is a weekly web show in which we discuss the latest news in skepticism.
Whether it's a new case of spontaneous human combustion, a conspiracy theory, the latest update on the upcoming robot apocalypse, tech news for skeptics, or the latest wacky religious claim, we cover it all.
We record the show live as a Google Plus on-air hangout, So join us and our host, Brian Gregory, for an hour of mostly intelligent talk every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern U.S. time.
Watch us at virtualskeptics.com and participate in the show on our hashtag #VirtualSkeptics.
The Virtual Skeptics. It's like Meet the Press, but with chupacabras.
Who's in the best-selling show? Is their life on Mars?
And joining me now all the way from Olomouc in the Czech Republic, it's Besh Saab. Hello, Besh.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm envious. Oh, I'm so envious that you're in Olomouc at the AFO, the film festival in the Czech Republic. That's where we met this time last year. How was it this year?
It's been really wonderful, and we're missing you.
Oh.
And the people here are pretty awesome. You have origami left out around the convict. Convict, of course, is the university where the festival is held. So your legend lives on here very profoundly.
Oh, that's really nice to know. If I can't be there in the flesh, at least some of my creations can be scattered about the Czech Republic. That's nice. So let's talk a little bit about why you're at the film festival and a little bit about the festival itself. As I said, we met there last year. We were both on the international jury to select the best science documentary, and I believe that you're at the gathering now after the awards for this year.
The main award, I guess, is the one that comes from the international jury, of which you and I were a part last year. And that went to a German film about honeybees. I didn't have a chance to see it this year, but I saw one clip and the cinematography was amazing. And apparently they really explained the science behind how bees work as a team and then go on to create honey for, well, themselves and also for us.
Wow, fascinating! That sounds absolutely fascinating. And I have such fond memories of Olomouc, the little city there in the Czech Republic. It's so beautiful and such a lovely setting. And I imagine you were just equally as charmed this year.
Yeah, it's really fantastic. The nice thing about coming back the second year, of course, is that you're a little bit more familiar with everything. You know all the people, and I was a little bit more relaxed all the time when I had to speak, and I had a few more engagements this year compared to last year, and so it was nice to be a little bit primed.
I'm delighted to hear it, and I certainly hope one day I'll be able to attend that festival again. It certainly was such a wonderful experience, and on top of that, you got to spend time with one of my favourite people, the astronomer Pamela Gay.
Mm-hmm. Pamela Gay and I did an interview for the National Czech Radio. There was like a half-an-hour segment called Leonardo, and they were on there to speak with her a little bit about her CosmoQuest website, and then afterwards they wanted to speak with me because of my ambitions and plan to go live on Mars.
Well, let's get back to this wonderful and interesting ambition, plan, dream, desire you have. Now, a few weeks ago, we had listeners from all around the world writing questions to you because you were locked away in the desert in Utah, I think it was, simulating a Mars mission, living in a little environment there, only going outside in a spacesuit. How can you sum up that experience? Do you think it was worthwhile? Do you think you learned a lot?
It was definitely worthwhile. I learned a lot, both because of the simulation itself and because of the people whom with I spent all this time. There were two people who work at NASA Johnson Space Center, and they're both professionals within their field. One of them is an expert in spacesuits, and the other one is an expert in countermeasures, which means how you can do exercises to offset the typical type of bone loss and muscular loss that you would experience in microgravity, or even, I guess, living in a habitat where you can't spend a lot of time outside or traveling distances in order to get regular exercise. And there was also a geologist there, and she taught me a lot about how to find faults and different types of rock formations, and it was very much an educational experience for me for a variety of reasons. But of course, then I got a little bit of a taste for what it would be like to live in a confined habitat in isolation in an area where everything is just rock and there's no plants around you or water, and when you go outside you can't really interact with your environment. I was doing some research there, more logistical experiments to understand what I would need to do if I were to come back and do like a blind crossover study. And a part of that, what I had to do was go out and do some EVAs or extravehicular activities. And I had a heart rate monitor on and accelerometers, and I would test my blood glucose and ketones before and after these EVAs. And then when I returned, I would do a series of cognitive tests and so forth. And what I ended up doing was exploring a lot of the terrain around me, and at the same time setting up some standardized EVAs that I can then use later on to test a variety of other things, like compounds that would then offset the cognitive and muscular fatigue that ensues after a strenuous EVA. On the third EVA, so this was after about 10 days I had been there, I actually stumbled upon water, which was rather surprising. I mean, to see surface water on Mars would be very astounding, of course. But to see it even at this high plateau desert in Utah was rather amazing. And I found it there, and it was just so exciting to see this, liquid moving water. It was only a small brown puddle, but it was definitely water nonetheless. And I wanted to touch it, but I couldn't touch it because I'm in a spacesuit, and you don't have that ability to interact with your environment in the way that we can on Earth. We can feel things, and the wind goes by, and we can smell. And that's definitely something which was really hammered home into me by that experience, and that was really important, I think.
That's a fascinating thing that you bring up, that when you go to Mars, or the first people go to Mars, that will be absolutely right. There'll be no such thing as direct interaction with the Martian environment. It'll all be done via wearing suits. I imagine, though, that from time to time samples from the outside will be brought inside, and then people will be able to physically put their hands on things. But from what I understand, or what I've gleaned from various reports about Mars, I think one of the biggest problems, and you may know something about this, they're anticipating, is the ultrafine dust.
Yeah, in the simulation site, there's actually a lot of fine dust that got into the hab and got on our suits and got over everything. But I don't think it even compares in the slightest way to the type of fine dust that they have on Mars. I was speaking to Norbert Kraft, who's the chief medical officer for Mars One, and he was saying to me that it's more like a smoke than it is like a sand. It's so fine that in a relatively dense atmosphere like we have on Earth, it would float around like cigarette smoke. But on Mars, it settles down to the ground because the air is so thin. This is a pretty interesting concept, and it will be everywhere, and we won't be able to prevent it from getting inside of the hab. So let's hope it's not poisonous.
Well, I just hope for your sake that's true. But if it does get inside the habitat is going to be, of course, pressurized to more or less Earth, sea level, or I'm not sure. Maybe you can fill us in. So maybe that could help with the dust.
Well, it probably won't be pressurized all the way to sea level. That's not really necessary, but it'll probably be about 60% of sea level pressure. I imagine something around that. And then, of course, there'll also be filters. We'll continually be scavenging the air anyway for carbon dioxide and replenishing it with oxygen all the time. So at the same time, we'll be able to filter out quite a bit of the dust. But it will get inside. That's for sure.
So that's interesting. It's something I only thought about when I asked you the question. The habitat will be pressurized to make it habitable for humans, of course. And you're suggesting something around 60% of what I'm experiencing now here at sea level. What does that equate to? Would that be like living in somewhere like Denver or even higher up? I'm not sure what that means.
I think 5,000 meters is about 50%. So this is probably around 4,000 meters. I mean, about that.
Okay, so completely acceptable for human existence for a extended period.
That's like the peaks of many of the mountains in Switzerland where I ski. So.
Well, you can say goodbye to skiing if you go to Mars, I imagine.
I'll be saying goodbye to a lot of things, Richard.
Yeah, you will be indeed. So where do you think the Martian base is going to be located on Mars? Is it going to be near the equator? Is it going to be near one of the poles?
Well, it won't be near one of the poles, that's for sure. It'd be way too cold for that. And you also don't get too much sunlight down there, or up there. But it won't be right on the equator either. It'll be slightly north of the equator, maybe 10, 20 degrees north. The exact position within that region, of course, isn't really understood just yet. But the reason why they want to choose a location like that is because the northern hemisphere is much more moist, as in you could find a lot more water contained in the soil there. But you also want to be relatively close to the equator to make things as warm as possible and to give yourself, lots of access to sunlight all year round.
Okay, that makes perfect sense to me. Well, Besh, I can't tell you how envious I am that you're at the film festival in Olomouc. It's a wonderful festival. I had such a good time last year with so many documentaries that you and I both viewed last year. It was just fantastic. Who knows, maybe I can be there one day again. It's certainly a lot easier to visit you there than it would be on Mars, I think.
Indeed.
Although, I wouldn't rule that out. If someone was kind enough to donate a round trip to Mars, I'd certainly consider taking it.
Richard, when I was here, I gave this talk in the chapel. Remember the room that we did last year in the chapel?
Yes.
You gave a talk in the chapel, and then I gave one later with Andrew. So this year they booked me into the chapel. Mathieu wrote like a very enticing description for people to come in and put me first in the book so that a lot of people saw it. And the chapel completely packed out. And there was more people standing than sitting.
Wow.
And I was in there, and I really like to engage people in science by letting them be the drivers of the discussion. Because when somebody asks a question, it's because they're curious. And when somebody's curious, they remember the answer. And so I gave, I showed a few pictures from the simulation site, and I showed them a nice diagram that I had made to explain, how we get from Earth to Mars and the physics of it. And then I just opened up the floor for discussions. And and it went on for an hour and a half straight. People just asking questions all the time. And one person who kept asking questions was this little boy named 7 years old, who was 7 years old, 8 years old maybe, named Dominique. And then I've met him a few times since then, and he's absolutely convinced that he wants to go to Mars as well now, and would be very pleased to meet me there, he said. and his parents are wonderful people too, and it was really, this festival is very special in that regard, that you really have a chance to meet with the public and talk to people. And you were here last year, and you know what it's like. I couldn't say anything negative about AFO. It's really an inspirational place for the people who come to see the films, for the filmmakers, and for the token scientists that show up to do their part too. It's pretty awesome here.
I'd have to agree, and on top of that, I would say that the little city of Olomouc is one of the most charming places I've ever been to in my life, with the town square, the town squares plural, I should say, and that wonderful St. Michael's Church where you can go right up to the belfry and be standing next to the huge bells when they go off. That's something special.
I remember your video from that. That was brilliantly done.
Well, I tell you what, in the show notes this week, folks, I'll link to information about the festival there in Olomouc. I'll link to the video I made about standing next to the ringing bells, and I'll certainly add more information about our guest all the way from the Czech Republic, Dr. Saab. Well, Besh, again, our continued warm wishes for a successful process on your hopeful journey to Mars.
Thank you very much, Richard.
Podcast Science is an award-winning weekly science show in French hosted by a bunch of crazy enthusiasts. We are convinced that the greatest ideas in science are quite easy to grasp as long as they are presented with passion, using a vocabulary common to all curious minds, whatever their academic background, if any. You don't understand French yet? Well, it's never too late. All our stories have a written transcript on the website, and people from all around the world are using our content to learn Molière's language. Our topics range from 0 to infinity, from evolution to artificial life, from electromagnetism to the science of introverts. We just love mathematics, science, critical thinking. So do you? Want to join? You can subscribe to the podcast for free from our website, podcastscience.fm, that's in one word. You also find us on iTunes and SoundCloud. See you soon, hopefully. Hâte de vous accueillir. À bientôt sur Podcast Science.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone this week. Mars. I wonder if there's any chocolate on Mars. First mission to get to Mars, and they open up the door there, step out on the Martian surface, and there are chocolate Easter eggs scattered about for kids to find. They could be dreaming about tonight. Hey, look, if you're in Sydney in November this year, November the 28th, 29th and 30th, come along to the Australian Skeptics National Convention. Our special guests are the Skeptics Guide to the Universe, George Harab, Dick Smith will be there, Dr. Karl Kruszelnicki, lots of other speakers yet to be announced. Dr. Rachel Dunlop, of course, will be giving a very interesting talk, as she always does. Tickets available at www.skeptics.com.au. Don't miss out. This will be one of the biggest conventions, skeptical conventions held in Australia, well, since the amazing meeting in 2010. And before I go, a big thank you, of course, as ever, to those wonderful people who kick in, contribute, chip in, tithe. No, that's the wrong word. Help out the Skeptic Zone by donating less than $1 a week. 99 cents a week, I think it is, or something ridiculous like that. Less than a cup of coffee, as they say, via PayPal at skepticzone.tv. Your contribution collectively means the show keeps going. It's as simple as that. And a big shout out to Maynard. Yes, our wonderful friend Maynard. A couple of weeks ago I went to what they call the Mad Club reunion, which was a great afternoon in a record bar in Sydney upstairs. Music and silly antics going on, Maynard carrying on. It was terrific fun. And I'll add a link to the show notes where you can listen for yourself and see some photographs from Mad Club with Maynard. But for now, before I go. A couple of days ago, I went to the Royal Easter Show here in Sydney, the big country fair, so to speak, but it's huge, it's massive. It's a huge show of carnival rides and exhibitions and all sorts of things. I came across the little stand, little stall, the little booth of singing bowls. People selling singing bowls, which are metallic bowls, and you sort of run around the rim with a little tong or something, and they make wonderful vibrations, and they sound really great. But one of their claims written on their wall is that these singing bowls will cleanse food and water. Needless to say, I had a chat with the people at the stand there. They didn't quite understand when I said, well, what do they cleanse? How do they cleanse? Do they kill bacteria? They were very confused. Part of the thing is, of course, that these people simply aren't used to having people ask them questions. Cleanse food and water. Well, of course, these bowls can't cleanse food. They can't make them clean. They can't kill bacteria and so on and so forth. If you're going to the Royal Easter Show in Sydney and you come across the stand of singing bowls, you might, ask them how these bowls actually cleanse food and water. You know what? We might get them to change that claim. It's a bit misleading, I think. Rant over. So for this week, this is Richard Saunders, signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.